It's with great pleasure that I welcome you to the 12th virtual gathering of the Surrey Muse for Friday, March 26th, 2021. This is the 102nd gathering of the Surrey Muse since the inception of the Surrey Muse. The Surrey Muse is a wonderful gathering of the arts and community which takes place on the unceded Coast Salish territories of the Semi-Amu, Katsi, Kwikwetlam, Kwantlen, Kakayet, Swasan, Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam First Nations. These nations existed before so-called Canada existed, and it's essential that we understand that this land has been stolen from them. That has never been acknowledged by them or accepted by them. This particular gathering of the Surrey Muse has as its emphasis #equality and features artwork by Samia Arif, who has created a wonderful work of art, a transcendental third eye vision work of art entitled "The Future is Female." This is an absolutely inspiring and powerful work of art, and I am enjoying looking at it right now. The power and the beauty of the images and the hope for the future and the embrace of future is something that's evident in this particular image. And the bearing of witness with all of the eyes is also evident as well. An absolutely beautiful image. Forgive my armchair art criticism. I indeed have no criticism. I enjoy this image immensely. Thank you very much for producing this outstanding representation of art and freedom, Samia Arif, a very talented artist indeed. The featured author for the Surrey Muse this evening is Darcie Friesen Hossack. Darcie is a writer, editor, and publisher who has been nominated author for the Commonwealth Writers' Prize 2011 for her collection of short stories entitled Mennonites Don't Dance, that also was runner-up for the Danuta Gleed Award in the same year. Darcie has created a global online literary journal, Word City, monthly, under the banner of the UNESCO Ryla affiliate poet Mbizo Chirasha's Time of the Poet Republic. Darcie lately completed a novel called Stillwater, where in North Okanagan Valley of British Columbia, for a family with a Mennonite mother and a Seventh-day Adventist father, the end times are just around the corner. That's an intense combination. Darcie is a graduate of the Humber School for Writers. Welcome, everybody. Darcie Friesen Hossack to the Surrey Muse.
My name is Darcie Friesen Hossack from just outside the east gates of Jasper National Park in Alberta, and I'm so happy to join you here today at the Surrey Muse Arts Society. I want to thank you for having me with you and say a special thank you to Fozia Rafiki for her kind support. I'm going to read today both from a forthcoming novel called Stillwater and from my collection of short stories. Mennonites Don't Dance, published by Thistledown Press in 2010, was shortlisted for the Commonwealth Writers' Prize and the Ontario Library Association's Forest of Reading Award. It was also the runner-up for the Danuta Gleed Award. Most of my writing circles themes of family and religion. In my stories as well as my novel, there is love and dysfunction, damage and destruction, hope and grace, all while looking into the experiences of young and adult children, parents and grandparents. I explore generational ties, sins, and redemption. And very often at the center of it all, to bring everything and everyone together or to tear them apart, I write about food. Here, in a story called Ashes, which revolves around a mother and daughter-in-law who are about to share an unspeakable loss, each woman is shown for who they are in this moment when they come together in their shared kitchen to bake peach pies. It's been so warm, almost like home on the coast, Libby says to Anka, even though she knows referring so often to her life before Saskatchewan irritates her mother-in-law. I saw Meryl next door putting out trellises for her sweet peas. Meryl, Anka says, as though she has never heard the name. Mrs. Larson's daughter-in-law, remember? There were such lovely peonies at Jake and Meryl's wedding last summer, all different pinks. I'm thinking of trying to hybridize a new variety to name after her. Libby knows Anka wishes she would attach herself to the daughters of Anka's friends rather than their sons' wives. What I know is that you sure as sin don't want anyone to think of you in the same breath as that senseless girl, Anka says. I went to pay her a visit after she moved in over there, you know, and found her popping pansies into her mouth like she was eating lettuce, acting as though there was nothing at all strange about it, too. Why, you would want to name a flower. Her voice trails off as she sees Libby heaping fruit into a pie shell. Libby, you'll be using up the last of my good frozen peaches on just one pie if you keep that up. I want at least 6 to put in the freezer. Besides, it just doesn't seem right to pile fruit all up on top of itself like that, does it? Anka bites her tongue to keep from wasting a short sermon on immoral fruit. Libby doesn't appreciate good sense. Deflated, Libby spoons most of the fruit from the pie shell back into the bowl and spreads the thin layer of remaining peaches over the bottom before fitting on the top crust. She crimps the edges and wonders when Anka learned to be so tight. Even sleep seems a necessity Anka resents when there is work that could be done. Libby, though, as she sits by the kitchen window and works on the peaches, is in a good mood, wanting peace on such a lovely day when everything outside seems filled with possibilities. She smooths a hand over the small new curve under her apron and looks outside. Back when I lived in Kelowna, I was a food writer for trade for more than a decade when I wrote more than 600 short food-related memoirs and recipes for regional newspapers around interior British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. Food is so central to who we are personally and culturally. For myself, I am the daughter of a Mennonite mother, which means that farming is seen as a requisite for godliness, and food is something not only to enjoy, but to fuel a body to go out and deliver a calf or pull a plow. Being farmers historically, raising cattle, pigs, and grain, meant that ingredients such as cream, sausages, and bread, noodles, or pockets made from wheat dough were always on the table. In the title story for Mennonites Don't Dance, Lisbeth has left her family home for the first time and is living in a basement apartment beneath a Mennonite couple who make it impossible to forget where she comes from, no matter how much she might try. Although there were 4 sets of curtains hung in the apartment, there were only 2 windows. The one in the bedroom was so small and high that Lisbeth had to stand on her bed to peer out. There were 4 patterns of embossed wallpaper, 2 clashing colors of wall-to-wall carpeting that were laid with opposing naps, and a potted plant that was a housewarming gift from her sister-in-law but wouldn't survive the week without natural light. Lisbeth's landlords were an old Mennonite couple, which was the only way her parents had finally consented to the move. It seemed to help ease their concerns that the Giesbrecks, when they met them, smelled of liniment and had, against Lisbeth's repeated objections, promised her parents they'd look after her like their own daughter. "I'm trying to not feel like someone's daughter for once," Lisbeth had said to her mother. "Well, I'm sorry to hear that," her mother said. "But you are my daughter, and you can't get away from that no matter how far you go." "That's not what I meant, and this is hardly far." Lisbeth flung her arm in the general direction of home. 15 minutes, Mum. Less if Dad or Matthew drives like they're late for supper." Already, old Mrs. Giesbrecht had kept her word with an enormous crockery dish filled with farmer's sausage and both Saskatoon berry and cottage cheese vareniki covered in heavy cream gravy. When she had brought it down, Lisbeth had thanked her, but after closing the door, she rolled her eyes and muttered to herself, "No wonder we're all fat as cheese." She intended to make toast for supper, and in a few days buy a salad cookbook, and then, who knows? Instead of the skirt she always wore, maybe she'd even buy some slacks, if she could find a flattering pair. As Lisbeth ran out of things in the apartment to count, she opened the fridge and reasoned that one more day of cream gravy wouldn't make any difference. She took out the casserole dish, leaned against the table, and began to fork up mouthfuls of cold vareniki, the congealed gravy coating her tongue with memories of home. Lisbeth thought about her mother and felt a twinge of longing that she quickly swallowed down. But it kept rising to the surface, and soon she thought of the smell of bread baking in the morning, of her sisters in the kitchen, of John and his appetite, the way he used to eat a whole loaf all by himself every day. What had happened to all that extra bread? After John died, did their mother make less dough every day? Or did everyone take their share of what he'd left behind? An extra 100 pounds of flour a year had to go somewhere. Lisbeth put her fork down, lowered her forehead slowly into her hands, and sank into the one kitchen chair that she'd been able to fit into the apartment. Loneliness washed over her until she felt she would drown. That night she lay in bed, tears wetting her hair, and wondered whether she'd ever stop being her dead brother's sister. I am the daughter of a Mennonite mother, and also the daughter of a Seventh-day Adventist father, where Sabbath-keeping replaced farming as a channel to God. Well, I grew up with sausages, vareniki, and cream gravy in my mother's and grandparents' house. My father's house and kitchen was given over to a particular brand of vegetarianism that only people from the Adventist tradition could ever possibly recognize as food. In Canada, every few months or so, depending on where you lived, a semi-truck full of religious-themed books would visit, also carrying a small grocery store with shelves and freezers stuffed with canned, dried, and frozen meat substitutes, such as breaded and canned fry chicks swaddled in a salty beige gravy, or thick rolls of impossibly pink wham for sandwiches. At home on a Sabbath afternoon, lunch after church might be cutlets or steaks made from elasticy slices of gluten, which had been washed out of wheat flour before being breaded and fried. So when I began to write Stillwater, which features both of my family's histories and cultures, it won't be a surprise that food takes its place as almost a character all on its own, starting on the very first page. Here, Lizzie and her family are visiting a Seventh-day Adventist commune in the North Okanagan, where Lizzie is collecting recipes for her home economic assignment back at her church school in Kelowna. Seated at a farm table on the eating side of the commune's kitchen, Lizzie looked up just as the director's wife bent to check inside one of two industrial-looking ovens. "Find yourself a recipe yet?" said Mrs. Schlant, and Lizzie, who had already decided not to like anything about the place, thought how easy it would be to Gretel the woman inside and shut the door. "I've been doing math," Lizzie said, imagining a nice, crispy skin, something a Seventh-day Adventist should know nothing about. Nevertheless, she picked up the cookbook Mrs. Schlant had offered when she'd first arrived and flipped a few pages. All the usual dishes, walnut patties and mushroom sauce, spaghetti and gluten balls, were there along with a few that Lizzie didn't recognize. Onto those pages, Lizzie stuck a series of post-it flags until she finally came to one she knew she had to have. She took out a recipe card from the front pocket of her backpack, set it on the table, and printed Natina at the top. Before she could get started on writing down the ingredients, though, her mother opened the mudroom door just off the kitchen and let herself in, along with the cold breeze. "There's still snow out there," Marie said, stomping her feet. "I'm afraid Daniel already changed to the summer tires, and I don't even have the right shoes on today. Caught us all by surprise, I guess." "April's late for the Okanagan," Mrs. Schlant agreed. "Lizzie, you'd like the bakery and the homeschool out there, I think," Marie said, and shed her jacket onto an iron hook. When her mother said things like that, it was as though she and Lizzie had never met. But since Lizzie needed her mother on her side, she kept quiet as Marie stepped out of her shoes, arranged them neatly on a black rubber tray, and stuffed her feet into a pair of crochet slippers from her jacket pockets. The slippers, a polyester checkerboard of yellow and brown yarn, looked like two overripe bananas, and Lizzie offered up a years-old prayer to keep Marie from slipping. Crossing the expanse of green and white linoleum between them, Marie pressed a cold cheek against Lizzie's warm one and brushed Lizzie's bangs from her face. Lizzie leaned into it for a moment, then batted away the attention, traded her pencil for a pen, and clicked the nib a few times. At that, Mrs. Schlant made her way over to see which recipe Lizzie had chosen to add to her scant collection. "Oh, I thought you might like that one," she said, straightening an invisible crease in her apron. "What others do you have already?" This time, when Lizzie reached into her backpack, she withdrew a Ziploc baggie and dropped it on the table. Inside were a dozen or so cards printed with recipes she'd already gleaned from here and there. Mrs. Schlant unzipped the bag. "Sweet and sour fried chick," she said. "I don't think I've tried that one." "Mum invented it," Lizzie said, lifting her feet off the floor and snugging her heels onto the front edge of her seat. "Then it must be good," said Mrs. Schlant, and Lizzie saw her mother blush. "Back when Mum was my age, she used to make it with actual chickens," Lizzie said, which was nothing more than a matter of fact. "Oh, well, I see," said Mrs. Schlant, replacing the card in the bag and setting it on the table with a little push. Lizzie tipped her head to one side for a better view of the director's wife. She was a sturdy woman, more so in her bones than her flesh, older than Lizzie's mother, but not by much. "And pork," Lizzie added, dabbing her tongue to her palm and using the spit to wipe away a blob of blue ink. "Sweet and sour pork was your favorite, wasn't it, Mum? My grandpa, they lived on a farm, you see, used to let her choose which pig to kill." Lizzie, who'd never met her grandfather, and never would, given the fact that he had died when Marie was a girl, had no idea whether that last part was true. It had the hoped-for effect, though. Mrs. Schlant's hands fluttered up towards her neck, where she fiddled with the topmost button of her blouse. In Stillwater, almost every single chapter is followed by a recipe that is either Mennonite or Seventh-day Adventist, because it truly is my belief that a people cannot be understood without also knowing about what they cook and eat. So before I go, I'm going to read a recipe. This one, called rollkuchen, is for a Mennonite dough that is fried and often eaten with slices of fresh watermelon in the summer. I'm going to read rollkuchen as a poem, although it is neither part of Mennonites Don't Dance nor Stillwater in this form, but something I wrote for a reading series called Writers Reading Recipes. Rollkuchen. When my Mennonite grandmother was alive, I asked her how to make rollkuchen. "I'll show you," she said, and handed me a chipped enamel bowl and a fork, 3 eggs from an ice cream pail fresh from Uncle Bill's chickens. Grandma, delighted when I could crack them with just one hand. "Some cream," she said, and gave me a jar from Uncle Harry, so thick I needed a spoon to get it out. Without measuring, Grandma pinched salt and baking soda, placed the fork in my hand, took my hand in hers, and we whisked, flour from the 100-pound barrel in the cold room downstairs, a little, then a little more, until the mixture came together. On Grandma's table, I pushed the dough away with the heels of my hands, then with my fingers gathered it back towards me. Just for a minute, while Grandma set a pot of lard onto the back of the stove to melt, then hot enough to burn down the house. "Listen," she said, and tipped a spoonful of water into the pot, causing it to hiss and scream as though the devil himself had been dropped into the fat. We rolled out the dough, cut it into rectangles with a butter knife, cut slits into those, and folded the dough through to make each into a knotted rag. 2 at a time, the roll kuchen fried in the lard, while Grandpa came inside with a watermelon that could never be anything but sweet. Thank you so much for listening.
Tonight's featured poet is Larissa Lai, who is of course a poet, but also a novelist and an educator who has published 8 books and has won many literary awards. Involved in cultural organizing, experimental poetry, and speculative fiction communities since the late 1980s, she has just published her 4th and latest poetry book, Iron Goddess of Mercy, with Arsenal Pulp Press. Larissa received the Jim Duggins Novelist Prize in 2020. Her novel, The Tiger Flu, won a Lambda Award in 2018 and was named otherwise honor book and was shortlisted for the City of Calgary W.O. Mitchell Prize. Earlier, she published When Fox is 1,000 in 1995. And this particular publication was something which was related to the Astrea Foundation Emerging Writers Award in apparently 2004. And it was shortlisted for the Books in Canada First Novel Award as well. Salt Fish Girl, published in 2002, was also shortlisted for Sunburst Award and the City of Calgary W.O. Mitchell Prize. Her poetry collections include Sybil Unrest, Automaton Biographies, and Eggs in the Basement. Her book of literary criticism, Slanting Eye, Imagining We, in 2014 was shortlisted for the Gabriel Roy Prize in Literary Criticism. Larissa holds a Canada Research Chair at the University of Calgary on Treaty 7 territory, where she directs the Insurgent Architects House for Creative Writing. Please welcome Larissa Lai, everybody.
Hello, Surrey Muse. It's Larissa Lai here. I'm so excited to be reading for you today. Before I begin, I'd like to start with a territorial acknowledgement. I think it's a really, really important thing to do. So I'm coming to you from Treaty 7 territory, which are the traditional homelands of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda. This is the city of Calgary. It's also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. I'm really honored to be making my home here and grateful to the peoples of these lands for allowing me to live here as an uninvited guest. I'm going to read to you today from my new poetry book, called Iron Goddess of Mercy, which has just come out from Arsenal Pulp Press. This beautiful cover design is by the wonderful Jasmine Welch, who is the designer there. I'm going to read to you 6 little fragments from this book, but before I do so, I thought I would talk a little bit about what it is I'm doing. It may not be obvious. It's a slightly kooky little book. So for those of you who are wondering what the heck I'm up to, I thought that I might just say a few words before I even start. So this book takes a number of forms, or there's a number of forms at work in this book. The epistolary, otherwise known as the letter. It also partakes of the form of the haibun. And there's a gesture to the I Ching as well, which is a Taoist oracle. So you'll notice, if you happen to have the book in your hands, that there are 64 fragments. This is to honor the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. But I'll talk to you a little bit now just about the letter, because I think it's one of the most sort of obvious ways into the book. So as you're listening, you'll hear me making an address, as one does to a person to whom one is writing a letter, or these days increasingly like emails, right? Dear so-and-so this, dear so-and-so that. The reason I do that is I do think that poetry has a measure of power, maybe just a small amount of power, but a measure of power in terms of making a contribution to changing the world in some small way. And the way that it's possible to do it through the letter in particular is that each time we write a letter to somebody, each time we address somebody, we're in a sense also calling them into being. And so I take that and recognize it as, as a power, maybe even a kind of magical power, a power that emerges through language, to call into being or back into being those human and non-human entities to whom I wish to speak, and with whom I wish to imagine a relationship in a particular way. So there's a way of, you might think about the poems as imagining both myself and the interlocutor into being, or both the speaker and the person with whom the speaker is speaking into being, because the speaker is not always necessarily me as such. It's not always Larissa as such. But I'm thinking about that, the way we speak to others, human or otherwise, brings both ourselves and them into being in a way that is different each time we do it. And so I'm taking hold of that difference a little bit. This book also came into being after hearing an episode of Writers and Company in which Colm Toibin, the Irish writer, was talking to Eleanor Wachtel, and he was saying, you can't write about the Furies. By that point, when I heard that interview, I had already started writing these things. They were so full of noise, full of speech, full of a kind of unexpected language. And I wasn't sure what they were. And when I heard him say that, I thought, that's right. You can't write about the Furies, but maybe the Furies can write themselves through you. And so that's another way that I think about the language in this poem, Erupting. I am also thinking about the city from which my family comes, which is going through some pretty hard times right now. That city is Hong Kong. And the hard times, of course, has to do with, the loss of a lot of freedoms and hopes for democracy that are rapidly disappearing. The other thing on my mind in the writing of this book is troubles in our own current cultural moment, tensions between white folks and BIPOC people, and the difficulty of the term BIPOC itself, its incredible, almost impossible heterogeneity, the strange bedfellows it makes, all of the forms of difference that term seems to want to subsume, and yet it still has a political usefulness now, I feel. And so I'm also thinking about the kinds of relationships that are possible within it, and the ones that aren't as well, the kinds of kinships across vast fields of difference that it's possible to build, and where those kinships fall down. So I'm thinking about the possibilities of solidarity, and also the impossibilities, those places where solidarity just isn't possible, and what to do and how to be with others when the breakdowns occur. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in this book. And hence, in a way, the impossibility of its language, which I think you'll hear right away. Okay, so I'm going to leap in. I'm going to read to you 6 of them. They're from various parts of the book. But I think the book allows that. It's almost possible to enter at any point and, you know, glean a little bit of a something, because the wholeness of the text is impossible anyway. But I will start at the beginning. So this is number 1. Dear Maynard, meet me halfway at the crossroads where we played touch footsie, our pedicures glistening bright in the moonlight. Dear Monad, when you were my one and homely, we aired our uglies to ducklings wet as greenbacks aching for a border crossing. Dear Mina, parroting the last politic, dear miner, I'm digging deep for gold, for diamond dust, asbestos, my best friend's girl. Dear Mooney, hugging the cult of the belt, the boot of the bat, the bear and the bull, full of it, Sully, my gully, the gray bird rat of the sky, screams, dreaming of gullible burgers as the market door swings open to the gray and rainy. Dear Kool-Aid, dear gut rot, dear deadhead singing Where Have All the Flowers Gone? Dear Dust Bowl, dear Shanghai Shek, dear Shrek, your smile green, your antenna scan the skies of our distant early warning line. Dear Monster Mash, tear me to shredded chicken, I'm so hungry I could cry. Dear Morning Has Broken, dear Token, my best friend's one and only, dear Mayhem, dear Mooney, howl at it while your vocals stoical, while the chord of your swords still sharp and dark as a Clark's inkling, recording rust and rebar, tea and totals. Dear Moaner, parroting the harp seal and munching flipper pie. Dear Mailman, staking your hot plot, digging deeper where the white man's dug before. I've been working on the stale road, haunting the crossroad where we burnt ghost money, smoking the stairway to heaving boulders rolled from mountains, dynamiting our break on through to the other's mother, the love of my light flight blasting a rocket ship to Venus. Dear Dolly, gosh golly, implicated in the Hog's Holly, clearing brush for democracy's propolis, staging the metro's underground for undocumented crossings, while bees buzz around your head till you can't think straight, and they're measuring your cranium for uranium, digging deeper than down for the black gold to bomb your ass to kingdom kumquat. Or some young guy, the vegetables of my digital LAN, thirsty as a burst oil pipe, Skyping me in. Seek peace, find labor, buzzing around, windsocks, empty hive. This is number 36, so I'm jumping ahead quite a bit. Dear pluralism, thick fish without history, managing my difference, finding the soft chair at the unequal table, squishing your wish for justice. You beat the socks off white nationalism, I guess. Under your cover, I fail to undermine the seeming self-evidence my body presents. I dish your platitudes, seek a door to the core of what's in store, the happy colonial racing his place while burying the suffering. If the island's turtles all the way down, what joss can Prospero toss? Must every mask be gridded to split the prairie for subdivision, the vision of land as perfect commodity supporting the lives of good Canadian families? My feet long to step off property, at last touch land. My homily swims a different river, seeks to stop the bop. Jackrabbit knives grass, hoping to pass a slim coyote in the night. Or a northern flicker, cheeks streaked and chest speckled. Till then, I heckle discontent from the back of the class, stick data and definition in the gut. Hinge event to prevent knowledge from accumulating like capital. If this mama could slap that golden apple back to a barely opened bud, what spud would ground its earthbound ambition? Old lady wanders barren earth, seeks daughter as heifer, long lost to the economic abattoir as cities gobble children piping prehistoric amoeba to sea. What boots click pavement, signal arrival at my door? Revolution or secret police? This is fragment 40. Dear gelatinous disc, swimming between L4 and L5, wishing you were a jellyfish, dreaming she is a man. Did you think this body was an ocean, or did you just get tired of holding up the world? You and me, we tumbled crooked from the dark cave of mothers unspeakable. Old Dr. Ross said after 30, so I guess we're not doing too bad in the glad garbage bag of history, making a run at the yellow light. Time's tight. I cite the story of Tokyo Rose and the overbright headlights of the new SUVs blinding me with science. Or prescience, the precinct of the body as cop singing, we had it all and now it's time to pay. What would you say to holding the tide a little longer as this Asian dances the conga line to get us out of there collectively or not at all, while the arch of patriarchy still elevates the lovely, dropping tokens into the ancient fare box TTC to YYC, while glowworms swing digital and greedy brothers grab every scrap they can get from the colony of this body. Burden of representation ruptures your fourth wall, and you get on my nerves, sciatic, sclerotic, bursting the bubble of my upright citizen. Turns out we came through the door of aftermath, our plumb line glum receiving what's left after the sum of the heart's been tallied, reckoning the bill of my disposable soul. I slammed the bowl of rice, worried there might not be another. Post-mem, the Korean embargo that shut HK from China made the debt personal, as if you starved me out yourself. If there's enough pretty stuff, will you forget your sorrow, return as sandwich meat for vertebra to give me my day in the curt court of just us? Or stay busted and let the temple crumble, bombed, embargoed, shunned, and silenced, then suddenly raised up as quota neo-lib commodity for the oddity of taking our place in overdetermined space, not the final frontier, but the rearview mirror, leg cast like Jimmy Stewart, spinning conspiracy theories and watching the world go by. Left foot warrior one, basement of Bauhaus Tower. Such a poser. This is number 41. Dear racial representation, clerk of exhaustion, splashing ads for my services over the cover of every grant application. Make sure you buy me cheap. Show me the toilet of my failure to deliver, as your co-op already showed me the cesspool of cessation. I shiver swim between the how of hot Chinese money, still in the hands of the Chinese man parking his Porsche for the triple occupation, bombing, rape, and embargo that's the cargo of Psyche seeking her lover under cover of 4 impossible tasks. Thank you for my secondhand classical education full of holes and reeking of naphthalene. Your mothballs sent their desire to cling to completeness, violated in an other iron box. The crypt of post-memory occupies my liver to push the time out of my spine out of joint. I howl, mournful at the door of love. My clumsy hands sort seeds, stitch skins torn across continents by the hellish greed of capital. That apple red hot as the video shop bombed by the Squamish Five, outraged in the cage of bad narratives. What if the apple finds pleasure in being bought and sold? My avatar swallows sedatives and beta blockers, awake to the chemical emotions lotioned by the grease of designated cash. I have my mask to spin flesh off spine, go offline to return weather to ether, mutter my mother back into being. My hot proxy teeth bite your Cold War economics. My sorrow's haptic simulacrum returns as massive ram, the glistening fleece of my wolf in designer clothing. No wetsuit sufficient for the polluted river twice, as the golems of oligarchy double your troubles signify coming as going, appropriation as apology, repositioning the nation as old power in new shoes. Butterfly bails on beauty as the colonial division of intimacy bums my balm. We scream for face cream as if any potion could make the motion. Unsettle Robert, remake rules as roots finally too deep for school. Congratulations, you've arrived at arrival's gate of my open business. '58. Dear Echo Chamber, the difference between Japanese Imperial and Japanese Canadian swims in ocean, Pacific specific as the frump in lumpen. Old Owl asks, do you care more for Chinese people or Japanese people? What cracks your convolutions between soldier and internee? That summer, Monica and I drove my red Nissan Sentra, echoing the red Datsun mom and dad had when we first moved to Newfoundland, this trip, Calgary to New Denver. Quote, gardens are thus not so much invented as always erupting from the difference of gardeners and traces of other forces at work in their midst. What can sprout in the garden after the arrival of the secret police? Can there be poetry after New Denver? The soul of the situation busts my gut. What spurn could I return? The split unbridgeable of those branded enemy alien versus perhaps when we were raping her, we looked at her as a woman, but when we killed her, we thought of her as something like a pig. King Kong touches Hong Kong and his sad gorilla hand cradles the screaming lady. Even CIBC can't put Canadian beside Imperial without getting squirrely. The nut of nation cracks eggs instead, as though omelet were substitute for meat. What comes first, the magic or the nation? As old Anderson wobbles Hans Christian or Benedict, swing Latinate to ling what this flesh can't pass, as current fascisms remember the same sorrow to call me back under cover of another wounded brother. Can't have it out on Twitter as Echo flits from circuit to circus, rages from body to machine to body to dream, seeking the feather coat shed as flesh, hoping she could leave it by the mirror pool just long enough to get clean. Clear pool reflects bright eye, dreams white flower fading, touch pad to wash face. 59. Dear pool, only for you I doff my feather dress. Swan sings sadly to lake, already ballerina thin on the verge of disappearance. Will you mourn me when I'm clean? I shed flesh, dreaming of princes who won't split the check, dreaming of other swans. What bill does the one who spies buy? When the hunter looks, is it me or his own image he seeks? Does he dream becoming pure as the hunted, long for the dogs who lick his hands instead to shred him, release him from his own private emperor? Or does he want my disappearance so he too can peloton the pool, contemplate his rugged individual, reach out to grasp his own forgotten beauty? My hands swing digital before the last part of me vanishes into ether. I flit tree to rock, mainframe to brain drain, seeking to say back the code to release trauma's treasure. I measure. Have I stated my case? Laid waste to Ducks Unlimited, clamoring to get in the right row for the right show? I retweet, remember massive wings that arched open to sky. Now satellites circle higher than my line of flight, dish the deal fast as data, spin the whirl of dizzy planets unwinding death to dance. Do you hear me in the circuits calling out my love? Only the hounds, moon-starved, ravenous, and confused over who's their daddy. All those colorblind soldiers I nursed in my white uniform. I storm, I mourn, screech my owl into gale force wind. You dim duck, to love the single swan is already surrender to the dying core. And this is the last fragment I'll read, with much gratitude to Trish Salah for this one. Number 60. Dear Pentheus, I didn't mean to make you and Actaeon go Dutch. What's Greek to you is Chinese to me. A fool, I flee, wanting to dodge the hard hit of the murder ball, but evading responsibility instead. If all balls were mirrored, could all kisses taste like honey? Instigating revolution, I still chase the money, hot Asian or vacation, someone's got to stock the cupboard and have fun doing it. I'm bopping for shopping, ramen guns, computers or meat buns. What matter feeds or greases the track of how do you get there from here? Squid twit leverages fear while the rear guard poses avant la lettre, scrambling for language after they've already eaten the cake. What stakes when the principles of carnival are dubious on the feminine? I twine my vines, the double thread knotted at one end and sharp at the other. No one asked the snake about the sensation of swallowing its own tail. I'd advise you to drink the wine. Is there so much hate for the ones we love? Kate's hounds howl the sick sound of rebound as dogs devour masters and mothers massacre, mistaking children for beasts. How can a king know which troublemakers are holy? Is it possible to become and recover mother by dancing with her? When the law sticks in every sovereign's craw, what subaltern gesture can rupture into agency? Must the flesh absorb the armor to render the body safe? Or are our bones already glittery on the inside, striding us wide into being? Butterfly hums Tennessee waltz. Best friend and sweetheart flutter nostalgic. Wings of monarch unfold. Thank you so much for listening to me. I miss you guys. I miss human presence and my friends on the West Coast so much. I hope you're all doing okay in these strange and terrible times, and that we come out the other side of it to another place, a better place, I hope, sooner rather than later. And I hope I get to see you in that time and in that place. Bye-bye.
This month's feature performer at the Surrey Muse is none other than the Surrey Muse's very own Miriam Sora. Mariam is a multidisciplinary artist of Kashmiri and Punjabi descent. Miriam, aka Mir, is a poet, vocalist, and an experimental creator combining poetry, voice, and the visual arts. In 2016, she began Tarka, a multimedia collaboration project. She has just released Waterprint by Mercury with Enigma Curry. Her early independent albums were created with musician Agitation and Astarte 23 and Dub Therapy. In 2018, Omega Project released Rock Bottom with Dariush Yakowski, while Lullabies for Insomniacs put out a limited vinyl and The Light Beams Will Guide the Way by Dreamspeak. Along with poems published in various literary collections and in a textbook for high school students, Miriam's first collection of poetry, Not to Understand, was published in 1994. She joined Theater in the Rough, a youth advocacy group, in 1998, co-founded Surrey Muse in 2011, and by 2016, in combination with launching Purple Poppy Press, a digital publisher, she published a second collection of poems with lyrics and drawings titled These Tales Are True. Miriam studied philosophy and creative writing at Douglas College. She is the media producer and art director of Surrey Muse Arts Society. Please, everybody, welcome our featured performer, Miriam Sora.
Objects get lost. Hey this, hey this. Gently off the surface in the grip of doom. tossed to the wind. If the dust is red without objects get lost, thoughts vanish and vanish. Feelings are so often disguised, chiseling off the surface. The grip of tools, I hold like rock, shadow bound dry to packed dust, travel far, far. Is not buried. If this dust were trees, if it's raised to stars. Once we were children, words to say, your
This month's Surrey Muse open mic performer is Cannibal Faye of Waking Dream. Hi, Bree. My cat is saying hello, so I pause for a moment to acknowledge the being of Bree. Okay, let's return. Cannibal Faye of Waking Dream is a gothic music group that began in 2016 in New York's borough of Queens. That's where I'm from. Their latest releases include a track and EP, Psych Ward Zombie, the track Catharsis, a track with artist Feral Confetti, and another with The Odd Mother. Some of their influencers are Switchblade Symphony, Sisters of Mercy, Android Lust, and the bands such as Typo Negative, Rasputina, Emily Autumn, and Nine Inch Nails. Aside from music, the group members like to paint, make dolls, and fix miscellaneous instruments. The group was founded by Catherine Wakefield, who's on guitar, synth, and is a composer and producer for the group. For Eurythia Tachinidai, who's a keyboardist and composer and is a writer, and most recently Reggie Smith, who's joined as a rhythm guitarist. Waking Dream will be performing at the Delancey soon. Please welcome everybody, Waking Dream, and specifically Cannibal Faye of Waking Dream, representing Queens, New York, from the borough of Queens to Queensboro Landing, New Westminster. We represent Surrey Muse worldwide. Welcome everybody, Cannibal Faye of Waking Dream.